So if your wife leaves you and your kids hate you and you're in the bed suffering from heart failure because you've been killing yourself in service to that number, how's that going to look and feel? We are frankly one decision away from a radically different life. If you could earn twice as much money as you ever did in any W-2 and spend half as many hours doing it, what would you do with the rest of your time? Our careers and the stuff that we put out there in our persona, the image we paint to in our interviews and on LinkedIn are probably the least important or interesting part of us. Money can't buy you happiness, but money can buy you freedom to live the life that you truly want, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inspired Authority. Today, I have a very special guest. So I have Alan Page, who has spent decades in corporate leadership before becoming a career ownership coach. He's helping people rethink what success looks like. And over the past year, Alan has gone through his own season of reinvention. Today, I'd love to explore how we stop letting our careers define us and instead live aligned with who we truly are. Before we dive in, Alan, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself beyond the labels and the titles and everything that they see on LinkedIn?
You bet. Well, first of all, thank you, Laura, for inviting me on your podcast. It truly is an honor to be here. I was starting to chuckle inside when you said reinvention over the last year, because it feels like it's been a life of reinvention. So just the latest chapter has been emerging recently. So yeah. And thank you for that allowance to talk more about outside of LinkedIn, because frankly, our careers and the stuff that we put out there in our persona, the image we paint to in our interviews and on LinkedIn are probably the least important or interesting part of us. So yeah, a little bit about my story. Some people might pick up from my accent. I'm not from Denver, even though that's where I dwell now. I spent my life growing up in Texas, other than a few years in the Navy in San Diego and traveling in the world and having some fun. But I grew up with a couple of blue collar parents in Irving, Texas. We were, some people say we were poor, we were po, as the saying goes back then. But raised in a deep Southern Baptist red state of Texas and all that entails. Their marriage didn't survive very long. And, they had me they got married right out of high school. So, they were struggling to neither one of them went through college or anything like that. They were doing the best they could. Spent most of my life growing up with my mom in the Dallas and Houston area, kind of split. Went through a couple of stepfathers in that period of time. Unfortunately, beginning my senior year in high school, my mother took her own life. And that derailed a lot of the typical path forward. So I wasn't quite ready for college and a career and all of that stuff pretty early on. So found my footing in the Navy, went in there to kind of get my act together, and it was a safe place to find achievement, get my confidence, my feet underneath me. I was fortunate enough to become a naval air crewman and search and rescue swimmer. So that was a lot of fun. I got to fly every day and took about a year and a half of really hard training to earn my wings and get out into the fleet and start doing the thing. But that provided the confidence that I really needed to kind of get my oxygen mask on and get ready for academia. So got out of the Navy, met someone while I was home on leave and boomeranged back to Texas. Got married while I was grinding it out 40, 50-hour weeks in a job, taking 12 hours of night school to get a bachelor's degree. Then, we started having babies and, I'm the proud girl dad of two of the most amazing women this world has ever seen. So I'll gush about them a lot. But raising kids and a family, still grinding it out, did my MBA nights and weekends, and just really got on the corporate rails and did that for a very long time. Spent 35 years in corporate life before going through, one of many phases of transition and, ultimately becoming a business owner. So yeah, there was a lot in that background, but that's kind of the major strokes.
I love it. Do you ever miss San Diego?
San Diego was incredible. And every time, and I've still got friends that are there, anywhere from Imperial Beach all the way up to Temecula. Every time I fly in there, my heart skips a few beats. A lot of it feels like I never left back in 1989. Same old scenes that, going to La Jolla, that's sacred ground to me. I don't even know how many hours me and my best friend spent sitting on the cliffs there, envisioning what the rest of our lives, were going to unfold like. If we weren't flying, we were up in La Jolla or at sea.
Did you fly planes or helicopter? What did you fly?
Helicopters, yeah.
Helicopters.
Yep. So our primary mission was anti-surface and anti-submarine warfare, but since I was in helicopters, I had to be air search and rescue swimmer qualified. So I always had my bag of wetsuits just in case. But
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a hard to believe I got to do what I got to do when I was, 20 years old.
Right. But now you live in Denver, so do you miss, like, the ocean?
It's kind of funny. People talk about, are you a mountain person or an ocean person? And it's yes. I didn't start snow skiing until I was 53 years old. And now that's to age myself and let liver spots jump out all over it. Yeah, that's 9 years ago. But I'll ski about 50 days a year if I can. But anytime I start to get the Jones a little bit for the ocean, there's nothing quite like putting your piggies in the salt water and running along a beach.
I totally agree with that. I love my piggies in the sand.
Yep.
So, thank you for that background and thank you for being so vulnerable and really sharing a lot of your story. We're going to get deep into it. So, let's start with your career because a lot of the people that probably listen are deep in their career in their corporate careers. And so I want to talk about your corporate career and then I want to talk about career ownership and then we'll keep getting even deeper. So you spent over 3 decades in corporate leadership. What happened that made you realize you wanted to coach people instead of climbing the corporate ladder yourself?
Wow. Well, it took a minute to get there. It became, to kind of rewind a little bit, back during my MBA program, it was becoming a running joke with my cohort because it was a 3.5 year program. SMU was a 60-hour program, and nights and weekends it's going to take a minute. I got acquired 3 or 4 times just during the MBA program. So it was like, this semester, who are you working for, Alan? When you think about M&As, these things are not in our control. Like I didn't wake up in the morning and ask for the company to be acquired and, having to survive the next round of layoffs or the next quarter or whatever that was going to look like. So there were other acquisitions that happened over the course of that life that never really made me feel like I was in control of my career. And frankly, I didn't know any better. After mom, went away, I clung to the only system that looked safe, right? Get a college degree, even though no one in my family ever had, but get an education. That'll be your ticket to safety. Get on the corporate rails, climb the ladder, earn as much money as you can, hopefully get to the finish line with enough money to retire and play golf before you die. That was that was the model. I didn't have the benefit to go off to some liberal arts school and learn humanities and find myself and challenge my dogmas and all that. I needed to survive. And so that's what I did. Got out of the Navy, got on the corporate rails, and did the thing. I did it as long as I could. The last, I guess, the real, we'll call it a come to Jesus moment, was I was in yet another software company. And the two leaders above me who had been instrumental in me joining that company had left. My boss, who I had a long, long history with, we had been peers together. He had worked for me once upon a time. I'd worked for him a couple of times. I'd been in the guy's wedding. We go way back, right? They left the company and here I was. And I was burnt to a crisp. One Saturday morning, I'm sitting here drinking coffee, just almost despondent. And I'm like, I just don't think I really want to do this anymore. But what are my options? I think a lot of us think that we're trapped. We're not. We are frankly one decision away from a radically different life. We just don't know it. The keys are dangling right there. Oftentimes it's just ignorance. And this was my moment. Yeah, I told my partner at the time, you know, I think I would rather sell everything I have and greet people at Walmart than sell software one more day. At least I can make someone's day, but do I really need this anymore? And so, she asked me, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go out on LinkedIn and apply for 10,000 jobs because it's going to be the same crap, different day with a different logo. And frankly, I had never, literally 5 minutes before this conversation, I had started recounting what have been my major successes over all of these decades of grinding it out. It was a pretty small number. And I was always in strategic sales, not really transactional stuff, but it was a big, huge win and then a huge drought, and a big, huge win. And I found that while I was helping these companies achieve quarter to quarter goals and annual goals and everything else, I was killing myself in service to other people's goals. And my itches weren't really getting scratched. I felt like I was continually in survival mode. So I had to do something different. So I said, I don't know what I'm going to do different. It just can't look like what it's been looking like. I said, you know what I would really love to do is I would love to be that coach that I always wished I'd had by my side, but never had. I never really felt like I had a true mentor and a coach to help be my Sherpa along the way and to, get higher and do better and all those things. But I said, the reality is I don't know that that job exists in the software and consulting world anymore. It's sales leader role, quarter to quarter, get the money in the door, rinse and repeat the next quarter. What have you done for me lately? It didn't feel like truly taking an interest in human beings and helping them achieve their goals. So I said, I don't know. I'll just throw myself on the mercy of the universe and we'll see what happens. That was Saturday morning. On Monday morning, I got a cold outreach on LinkedIn. Call it a God thing, the universe intervening on my behalf, whatever. Use your metaphor. But a cold outreach came that looked unlike anything that I had seen. I'd been approached by brokers and recruiters, dime a dozen. This felt different. So I said, sure, set it up. So I set up the call and I actually had a coach that helped me find a way to business ownership. And it took a minute. So I will pause there. That was the epiphany.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And to be honest, I'm sure that that resonated with a lot of people. What you said about being one decision away from a radically different life is just so inspiring. Now, you teach career ownership. What does that mean?
Think about those of us who have spent our life in the W-2 employee world. What does that really look like? We've got to have the skills and abilities, the education, the resume, the years demonstrating these skills and abilities. If it's a leadership role, the right leadership style, the right cultural fit, the parameters get voluminous in terms of being the ideal peg for the hole they're trying to plug. And to what end? To help them achieve their goals. You are human capital. You are a human resource, right? If you get your own goals achieved along the way, congratulations. It was a really good fit, right? For some of us have done better than others in terms of getting all of their itches scratched along the way. The term career ownership is about taking ownership of your own career in service to your own goals first. So it really embodies this idea that we can't pour from an empty cup. If we're not getting our own goals met and achieving what we are looking to achieve in our life, then what are we really doing? It's really not sustainable. And that's where I found myself on that Saturday morning. This is not sustainable anymore. I'm running out of gas to do it. So it's about taking ownership of your career and looking at alternative paths that perhaps you've never considered. We all come to the table with a limited set of life experiences. We only know what we know and what we've been exposed to. Our parents informed us, our education informed us, our life experience to date has informed us, but there's a whole universe of stuff out there that we've never even looked at. And think about all the self-limiting beliefs that we have when we say, well, I could never fill in the blank, right? I was thinking about this on my run this morning. I mean, I've run 15 endurance races over my life. Now I'm a pretty big guy. I'm not going to win any of them. I'm a middle of the packer, right? Yeah, I've run a lot of marathons, but trust me, I'm not winning any of them. But if someone said, well, I could never run a marathon, well, not today, but you starts with the walk around the block. And ultimately, if you learn some things, you train some things, you build some muscle, you're capable of a whole lot more than you think. Well, there's a whole world of entrepreneurial opportunities out there that are mostly invisible to people. It's just a matter of some exposure and even challenging the funding side. Well, I could never afford to be a business owner. Oh, really? Why would you think that? There's a whole world of funding options out there that most people know nothing about. Let's go look at them, some of them. Now, maybe it's not right now, but at least you could have a vision to being self-sufficient. That's what we explore. We get really, really clear about two types of goals. What does my ideal life look like? And kind of a hypothetical, but it does not need to be. It starts off with if you could earn twice as much money as you ever did in any W-2 and spend half as many hours doing it, what would you do with the rest of your time? The LinkedIn profile and the value you've released and the quarters you've achieved and all that's probably the least important thing out there. What do you want your life to be about? Your career and the money should just be fuel for that tank. We should not be sacrificing our best life in service to a career that's not serving us back. So that's what the whole coaching experience is all about.
I think a lot of people don't ask that question to themselves because they feel like the answer is unrealistic. People want time with their family. People want to just be able to take time off and not worry about working. A lot of people work during their time off. So they don't realize that things are possible for them. It's just about making those decisions to move in that direction. You often say, like you said before, that you're not trapped. Why do so many successful people continue to feel trapped anyway? Like what is going on behind the scenes? Why people really can't even fathom a life different than the life that they're already living?
So often it's fear. It's just fear. And when we find ourselves, trying to survive day to day, living under duress, and some corporate cultures really embody that. I remember one company, I was a VP of sales, head of sales of a small division of a company. And I mean, every Monday morning was going to be, it was going to be tough. You're going to get picked apart. There was real terror in the room. And that's just was their leadership style. It's how they chose to build the culture around the company. That informs a lot of it. Now, I do like cliches because they can kind of point to some things, but one of the things we talk about in the coaching practice is fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. Now, it can be very informative and instructive. So if we take our fears, our perceived risks, some of them are real, some of them may not. What's a risk for you may not be a risk for me because it's about alignment, right? What are my goals? What's alignment to the goal? Who am I as a human being that can help achieve those, that can find a way to achieve those goals? When we turn those fears and assumptions and risks into questions, it disarms them. Well, gee, where's that coming from? Let's really lean into that and it becomes our friend. It becomes our compass to go get some objective information to see if what we assume is really true. Maybe our fears are founded and rooted in reality. Maybe they're not. The quickest way to de-risk anything is with objective information. I joke quite often with clients in the early going, if I had perfect information, I could be Elon Musk in about 9 months, right? But none of us have perfect information, but we can get closer than we think. And it's funny though, you were just mentioning a minute ago about working on vacation. There's a picture in my hallway here, and it's one of my favorite pictures of me and my daughters walking on the beach in Naples, Florida, on vacation. And my wife had taken the picture from behind us because it's sunset, it's a beautiful evening. got a kid on each side. They're kind of kicking the sand. One's holding my hand, and I'm kind of looking down reflectively, and well, my heart bursts every time I see I see that picture. But it bursts in two different ways. One, it was a beautiful memory. On the other hand, you know what I'm looking down at? I'm not looking down at the sand reflectively. I'm looking at my damned BlackBerry. How many vacations I remember standing outside the gates of Disney World on conference calls to try to move a deal forward while my family is in there without me. Decades of that sort of sacrificial in service to what, right? I missed funerals because I was on the road somewhere doing a deal. I mean, it's insane thinking about it now. We're going to run out of time, Laura. We're not getting any more time in this world to live our best life, so we better be intentional about pursuing it now.
I remember in the beginning of my year or in the beginning of my career, I did the same thing. I remember I was at Disney and I closed the deal though. But like I was on the meetings, even though like I should have been enjoying my time, but I was on the meetings trying to get these deals closed. I also remember distinctly working at my grandmother's funeral. Like it, I've done it. I think me as an individual contributor was much worse. As I became a leader, I've learned how to manage my time and my energy and do all those things. Otherwise, if I'm not showing up for myself, then I can't show up well for my team. But as an individual contributor in the sales world, yeah, there was no separation of life and work at all. And that was hard.
Indeed, and you learned that lesson much sooner than I did. So congratulations on that. Speaking of funerals, I was a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I think today, one of my favorite music artists passed away. Glenn Hansard, Irish gentleman. I've seen him a few times, a guy who truly changed my life and inspired a passion for live music for me when I lived in Chicago. Truly moved me deeply. And so I was thinking about his funeral, which I attended the live stream of it, and you know, Bruce Springsteen and all these people that we know of, have spoken about what a huge influence he was and a voice in the world. Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam was at his funeral, and they were very, very close friends, and Bono and Edge and all these guys, right? Before the funeral, I was thinking about what's his funeral going to look like. And you know what they're not going to do is people are not going to stand up at this man's funeral and talk about how many units he sold. What a great commercial success he was. People are going to talk about how he moved them, what a human being he was, how he stood shoulder to shoulder with other buskers on the streets of Ireland, how he started. I mean, this guy dropped out of school when he was 13 to pursue his music career. Okay, it wasn't about the education, it wasn't about the resume. This guy changed lives with his gift. So I want more of that.
How do you help people? Because I think a lot of the time people are so busy chasing their income and money that they aren't worried about actually intentionally designing their life. How do you help people distinguish, how to build a life that instead of chasing income, you're actually designing something that's going to be impactful for you?
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, so many people come to this table in a place of duress. Oracle, I worked at Oracle once upon a time. They laid off 30,000 people one morning with an email. People that thought I've got 5 more good years, in me or whatever, gone, right? Here, thank you for your times. Thankfully some of them got severance. A lot of people let go every day with no severance. And not only did their livelihood go out the window, but their health care went out the window. Well, trust me, you've got the undivided attention of these people. Now, some of them still come to the table after having been laid off, sometimes one, two, three, four, 8 times. And they still have this assumption, well, I just need the safety of a W-2 and a steady paycheck. Well, how's that been working out for you? Lots of decisions have been made in rooms that you're not in that affect your livelihood, your retirement, and in America especially, your healthcare benefits just went out the door because the company chose to go in a different direction. Some of these layoffs are happening but with companies that are killing it. Record earnings, huge profit margins, and they're still throwing bodies out the window on the daily. So some people are ready to have the conversation about maybe there's another way, and some people still aren't, right? I have to meet people where they are. Sometimes it's maybe life needs to kick you in the teeth a few more times before you're going to be ready to have this conversation. I'll be here on the other side, right? So I don't try to drag people onto a journey for which they are not yet prepared to do. The first thing we do is get really, really brutally, because I'm a coach. I'm not a broker. I'm not a recruiter. I'm a guy. Now my time is free to my clients. I get paid when and if they place in some of these entrepreneurial opportunities we look at by the brands, not by them. And we look at consulting and franchising and bootstrapping and all different ways to take control of your career. Some people are more ready to have that conversation than others, and some people are more ready to challenge their assumption than others. I meet them where they are. My job is to challenge people's thinking. Is that true? Is that something that you know, or is that something you think? Let's go find out, right? It has to start with, and this is religion to me, it has to start with what your real ideal life looks like. We'll look at the money. We'll look at the funding. We'll look at the income and wealth and equity goals and all that sort of stuff. I had a guy just yesterday when we went through his first real deep dive and we start doing the goal work. When we asked him if we look at your life a year from now, what needs to change both personally and professionally for you to be happy with your progress? All he wrote down was a number. So many millions. Cool. So if your wife leaves you and your kids hate you and you're in the bed suffering from heart failure because you've been killing yourself in service to that number, how's that going to look and feel? Pretty blank stare for a minute. He was ready then to have the deeper conversation about how he'd really want to spend his life. So that's it. If people aren't ready to have those sorts of conversations, maybe they do just need to go get another job.
That's very interesting. I one time asked one of my pals, I said, "What would you do if limits like, what would you do in your life with your career if limits didn't exist, if you were capable of anything, if anything was possible?" And he said, I feel so bad, I hope he doesn't listen to this. He said, "I'd be an accountant." And I started laughing, and I was like, "Okay, no, you're lying." Like, you need to think a little bigger. I couldn't but in that moment, I was like, I mean, there's so many people that just, like, they couldn't even imagine what would be possible if they truly did break the limits that they have in their mind about what's possible.
Yep, absolutely. So, Dead Poet Society is one of my favorite movies ever. And there's that, I won't try to butcher the quote, but Robin Williams is standing in front of the trophy case and all these pictures of these former private school students who've long since passed. And he gives a little bit of speech about, business, medicine, commerce, law, all of these things being important. They're essential to an economy and to life, but they're not what we live for. Art, poetry, beauty, love, passion, right? So I would never want to denigrate anyone's chosen path. You know, there are loads of people that are blue collar workers in this life who love what they do. And I can promise you, I know friends that are master electricians and blue collar folks, never went to college, never will. They are wealthy, not only financially, but as they've got rich lives with rich relationships and everything else. One of the worst pieces of advice I was ever given, I took a real interest in welding when I was in high school. And my shop teacher told me, you need to get that crap out of your mind. You need to go to college. You could be an engineer, a business owner, a banker, or whatever. And I took it to heart, and that's what I did. But I thought, ultimately, what crappy advice. I could have been an underwater welder. I could have owned my own business doing that. There's 100 different ways I could have gone in this life. But just because of this dogma about a college education being the only path to success, that so many of us embrace. There's nothing wrong with being an accountant if it yields the life you want, right? But no one's going to stand up at the funeral and say, wow, he could really close the books well.
I'm telling you, this guy, an accountant, was like, I was like, that is the safest thing you probably ever said. There's nothing wrong with being an accountant. I couldn't be an accountant. I can barely, yeah, I'm not good at math. So anyway,
I might be a little fussy if I had to do that every day.
yeah, me too. I was actually very good at accounting. I got an A in accounting in college, but it doesn't mean I was good at math or anything like that. I was just good at studying.
For sure. I mean, there's home repair things around here that I can do. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So good. Okay, so I want to get a little deeper because we've talked a lot about your career and how you pivoted, and then we've talked about the work that you do. But, we talked about in the beginning how over the past year you've done some work yourself, and I'd love to dig into that. So, can you share a little bit about what happened that made you realize that you needed to do your own deep work?
Oh, well, the deep work has been an ongoing thing. Every time I think I've done the work, there's more work to do. The onion thing, right? I guess the latest version, let's go there. I love to write. And I started the idea of writing a book decades ago. Again, when my kids were really young, I thought I love creative writing. I don't know if it'll be a memoir or it'll be, life from middle management book or who knows what, right? Spits and starts many, many times. Finally, I got to the point where I think, you know what? I think I've done enough of the work to let go of enough of the anger over the corporate, life and things like that didn't really serve me. I think I'm finally in a place where I've done enough work to put this down. And so I did. So I wrote this book. It's called The Long Walk Out, and there's a subtitle about a faith too small to a wonder big enough. And yeah, a memoir is part of it, but the whole impetus for that was my daughters. With when mom left this world at the age of 38, and then my dad, I tried my best over the course of his life to get in there into the dark, gritty places and learn more about his childhood and what made him the way he is to try to, crack the code, to learn more about myself through, what his influence was, right? Because we didn't lick who we are off the wall. The patterns were laid by our parents and our upbringing and all of that, right? And I could go on and on about that. But all of my attempts to get inside were pretty futile. All I got was the rainbows and unicorns version, which I know damned good and well were not the whole story. So I wanted my own daughters to know more about the inner life of their father than I ever knew about mine. So part of it needed to be a memoir. Part of it was one of the deepest parts of the work that I went through was my faith deconstruction journey. I've been very raised, very Southern Baptist, very literalist, a lot of hellfire and brimstone, a lot of, eternal torment kind of thinking. That was instrumental and frankly of my midlife unraveling. That's probably had a lot to do with, demons I had to wrestle. Probably very instrumental as to why my marriage didn't last after 26 years. A lot happened in midlife that I had to come to my reckoning. This book is a lot about that. There were a lot happened in my corporate life was not in my control that became very distressing. Getting laid off at the bottom of the financial crisis before the Affordable Care Act was there. Well, again, I lost my livelihood and I lost my health care. And when you've got a daughter with a pre-existing genetic condition that she didn't ask for, know, she could have been uninsurable for the rest of her life. And I was doing the math. How is that possible? I'm a veteran. I put myself through college, graduate school. I paid a fortune in taxes. How is it that we could be homeless if she gets a brain tumor? That sort of stuff, right? So all of that kind of gets unpacked in the book. It was another place in my life where I decided, who am I in this world and what is my contribution going to be to it? Whether the book monetizes and it's not going to win any awards, and I don't care. Okay, it's a story that I had to get out there for my daughters. I had to get it out there for me. And if it's able to help anyone else come to grips with their own journey and their own faith and finding, wonder and faith on the other side of maybe the dogmas they were raised with, then all the better.
The onion example or analogy is the word I should use. The onion analogy is really good because I feel like once you start pulling layers back, you get deeper and deeper into like, holy shit, I didn't know what was in here, right? When you talk about the real work, because a lot of people don't actually know what that means. I think people have healed from experiences and from circumstances, but like digging in deep and doing the deep work and the real work and the identity work and the faith work, what does that actually mean? Like for somebody who's never done it, what does that actually look like?
Such a huge, huge, important question. For me, survival mode for decades, just trying to find safety and security and certainty. I went to the intellectual place. If I can just understand something well enough, if I can crack the code, then I'll be safe. If I can just crack the code, then I'll be enough. If I can just crack the cold code, then I'll be successful. Another word for that is awareness. Now, I did go to a thing. I'm not going to drop, all the candy in the lobby here about the hop-in process, but it's a great thing. People should look into it. But it is a retreat where you go away for a week, you turn in your phone, you're disconnected, and you work on yourself for a full week. Incredible gourmet food. There's no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. You're there, clean it up, and really work on your patterns that got carved into you very early in life. We're going to map those patterns out and understand and become aware of what those patterns are. Well, that's where it usually ends for most people. If I can read another self-help book, if I can go to another seminar, if I can go to another retreat and just become aware of this, then I've done the work. Not true. So much of this stuff is stored in our nervous system, right? These things will fire, and sometimes the awareness becomes even more maddening than not being aware of what's going on inside of you in the first place. Well, now I'm fully aware and I'm still, nothing's changing. I'm not getting different outcomes or my behaviors in those moments when something fires. I say the thing or I do the thing that I wished I hadn't done, or I behave in a way in a meeting that I wished I hadn't, right? We have to get into the nervous system and start to do some things to create new neural pathways. There's a great book out there called Mind Magic by Dr. Doty. And and I love the manifestation stuff, the Gabby Bernstein stuff on the spiritual side and the internal family systems. That's has a great book out there about that. Dr. Doty he's now passed, but he was a neurosurgeon who talks about the way new neural pathways get created. And it is about what we think, what we believe will inform the way we behave. The way we behave becomes habits, which will rewire the brain. So when these things fire, we need to pause, take a minute, figure out a way to behave differently in the moment. And over time, that becomes easier and easier, right? That's what inspired me to start another business called Working Inland. And it's a website out there. I've not really marketed it yet. It's live, but it is about taking that awareness through shadow work. I love Carl Jung's shadow work stuff. It was very helpful for me in some very dark periods of my time, but it wasn't enough. Again, it was just more awareness of what was going on with my inner children and sequestered pieces of me that didn't feel safe to come out of the shadows. But what's going to change behaviorally? We have to do some practices to really get in there and rewire stuff. So that's what the work has become for me. More is much more about practice than awareness.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think a lot of people think healing is just like, oh, I feel better now. But as you're describing, it's becoming more aware, but then also like, okay, but now what am I going to do about it? Right. So, like, are there any pieces of advice that you can share with someone about when they do become aware of some of maybe the reasons why they act a certain way in their life being rooted in something that maybe happened earlier in their life, and they come to that realization. For me, it was I realized I always play small and I think by what's realistic because somebody told me when I was little that's not a realistic future. You've got to pick something safe, just like the welding teacher you had talked about. Then there's all these things, right? Maybe you blow up all the time and it's because your dad would blow up all the time. And there's so many things that create the human that we are today. Do you have any advice for people that finally get that aha moment? Like, how do they move forward from some of that?
Well, so I'll tell you this. I'm not a therapist. I just play one on podcasts. For me, and even therapy, let's be honest, some people will just dial it in therapy and then not do anything different, right? I mean, and there are some good therapists out there and some bad therapists, and some people show up and do the work and some people don't, and they're highly avoidant, right? Therapy, if we will take it, and along with the work that goes on outside of therapy, is a great place to start. I think we need to take mental health more seriously, and it should not be stigmatized at all. If you're struggling with how you're behaving and struggling with the life you're leading, go talk to someone. Help is out there available to everyone, but it will take your own work outside of the office to really go there. For me, it was what's showing up in the body in the moment, in the stress. When something's getting ready to fire, where does it show up? Tuning into our body. One of the things we talk about at Hoffman in the Hoffman process was they talk about the metaphor of a quadrinity. We are our physical self, our intellectual self, our emotional self, and our spiritual self. All four of them need to be in alignment. And frankly, the spiritual self should probably, be the lead of who we really were born into this world before all the patterns got laid down, right? That's what we want to get back to, free ourselves of those patterns that were laid down by people who are just doing the best that they could to, you know, before we can get to forgiveness and empathy and move past it. When it shows up in the body, that should be a marker. Am I getting tight in my neck and my chest and my, whatever? Something's going on. The body knows. 95% of our processing is happening subconsciously. We couldn't even get out of bed if we were conscious of everything, having to make our heart beat, right? So it has to, but there's a lot packed in there. It does show up in the body, and we should listen to that.
I think therapy is really great for unpacking and understanding and deciding or like really understanding, I want to say. Then there's coaching. And coaching is how do I move forward? So if you have a hard time connecting the what's happening and why am I this way to the okay, but how do I move forward now? I do think coaching is a really great thing. And there's all these different types of coaches. You're a career coach, there's trauma coaches, there's business coaches. There's so many different types of coaches. I think coaching is one of the most underestimated things that you can do for yourself to move forward in your life.
Totally. And to your point, there are so many different types of coaches. What coaches are not, they are not consultants. And there is a difference, right? What do we do in our consulting world? Well, we would do discovery, we gather requirements, we go off and synthesize the information, we make recommendations back. That is not coaching at all. For me, coaching is pulling people's truth out of them. And I've had clients, even though this is career ownership coaching, well, it's not really about the career, is it? It's about the life that you want. So for me, it's helping people pull their truth out of them with the framework, using some tools to do it. Then what we're going to do is look at all sorts of alternatives to go do that. Now, people bring their whole life to the table. I meet people that have been laid off. They're going through a divorce. They've lost a child. I mean, just horrifying life events, right? That have disrupted the, the path that they were on. We meet the whole person. We'll deal with it, right? This is about getting your life to the place that you want, come what may. That's the approach that this is just not about finding another income vehicle.
Beautiful. Now I want to get to a couple more questions. I know I'm supposed to go, but I get to a couple more questions really quick. Number one is the faith piece because you've talked quite about it, and I am a woman of faith, and I wasn't always that way. I was raised Catholic, but you stray and you don't understand, and how your parents tell you it should be versus what it really should be is very different. So talk to me about a for people who don't know what a faith deconstruction journey is. What is it? And then what did that look like for you, and how has your relationship with faith changed?
Oh, yeah, boy, is that the shoe has certainly dropped there, and it dropped a bunch of times, Laura. So I was, again, Southern Baptist literalist, this particular little sliver of Christianity and I'll use the term, from my Navy days that I was waterboarded with as a kid. I mean, frankly, it scared the shit out of me, big time. To be lined up when you're 7 or 8 years old in a Sunday school class and told to stand up and repeat after me. And if you do not believe what I'm getting ready to tell you, you need to believe, you, young boy, will burn in hell forever. And forever is a really, really long time for not having, getting the secret decoder ring, right? Terrified. I mean, my eyes were this big coming out of that room. And I'd heard many versions of it, but it had never been put to me that stark, that direct. And at 7 years old, you do not have the mental capacity yet of critical thinking to challenge these beliefs. And why would they believe that? And is that the only way, of viewing these stories, right? And then I went right from there into the church service where the preacher in his leisure suit in the early 70s is screaming at the top of his lungs. And we're on the second row. Terrifying. I was not allowed to protest. I was not allowed to question. I got struck for challenging these sorts of things. It was not a safe place to come to grips with that sort of stuff. You will believe these things or else. And or else is really, really bad. I tried and I tried and I tried. And then after mom, left the way she did, that's the only thing that looked safe to me. So I tried even harder to live according to that model and that belief system and, get through college, become the church leader and live in the suburbs and do all the things, right? Paint by numbers life. And it kind of worked until it didn't. Midlife, Brene Brown wrote an incredible essay called Midlife Unraveling. I recommend, and it happened to come down about the time I was going through it. But I recommend everyone read that because life, the way she put it, I think she said, life was whispering to me. And then finally, life grabbed me by the neck and said, I'm not fucking around here. And that's how it went. I was serving on church committees. I was teaching adult Bible school. I was doing all the things and it was not working. And I was watching some pretty heinous behavior with my fellow believers. And I'm like, where's the fruit of the tree? This is not, I'm going right to the red words and I'm not seeing it. And I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I completely walked away and had my proverbial 40 years in the desert and the wandering and the dark night of the soul picket, right? Ultimately, I wound up, and I'd read all the apologetics, trying to make the case for the faith that I'd been, waterboarded with, and everything else. I went deeply into this place, and I just couldn't anymore. So, and I even read every atheist book there was in the world, the Four Horsemen of Atheism. It was fascinating intellectual, inquiry, challenging, what has organized religion done to us all these years? The Crusades and lynchings and on and on and on, right? People who were Christians. So I read the other side, and that didn't take me where I wanted to go. Ultimately, I had to just say, you know what? When I look in the sky and I try to take any definition for God anyone could hand me, it by definition has to be too small. The author of all that is, the ground of being, if there is a creator, I mean, just think about the known universe is so impossibly big and complex. How could we can't even grasp our own solar system or our own galaxy, let alone the rest of it. How could we possibly have a definition that's sufficient for the creator of it? Why does anything even exist? I'll never be able to answer these questions. These are questions that I no longer have to answer. So it came down to this place of, and it's another cliche that I love, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. So questioning and inquiry, that's where the real beauty came out for me. I don't care what anyone believes. Why is it important to you? Tell me why you believe that. That's interesting. I may not believe, if a film crew were there recording the actual events, I don't know what happened back then. Why is that important to you to believe the literal, version of that? Cool. Does it lead you to a fruitful life of love and service to humanity? If so, keep it. Right? For me, that faith, and that's the kind of the punchline of the book. The version of faith that I had was just too small to contain the symbol of God and the author of all that is. So, wonder became a much bigger thing without having to have the pat answers.
Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that, we inspire people to rethink and to just go out there and find their true understanding of faith and all of that. Because I agree, all of this was not created unintentionally. So I unfortunately we are out of time, but I want to ask you one last question, Alan, before we leave, which is if someone is feeling like they are carrying around a version of themselves that no longer fits because, they had trauma, they had heartbreak, they had fear, or simply they've just been living on autopilot for a very long time. What's the very first step they can take today towards becoming who they were created to be and creating a life of impact?
Allow yourself to dream again. Dream and just really even fantasize about what you love. What do you love? How do you really want to spend the rest of your life in this world? Allow yourself to go there as best you can without constraints. Back during the marathon days, I've spent countless hours running, fantasizing about, what if I won the lottery, for example, what would I do with the money? Well, then you kind of get to this place, well, what difference does the money make? What we're really after is probably not the money, right? We're after freedom. Money can't buy you happiness, but money can buy you freedom to live the life that you truly want, right? There's nothing wrong with money. There's not anything wrong with financial goals and income, wealth, and equity and all that. There's got to be the life that you truly love that's enabled by that. Or what are you doing? And in service to what? Right? What are we in service to? Is it love and service and living a life of passion and hope and dreams and beauty? I mean, yeah, life's gonna hit us in the face now and then. That's what makes the wild ride, right? The ups and downs and all arounds. We're not just gonna sit in the lotus position for the rest of our days, but how can we live a life that we truly love and embrace every day? And sometimes we brush ourselves up and start again. What does that look like for you? Start there.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for your insights. I enjoy every conversation we ever have. I truly could probably spend a few more hours chatting with you about all of this. And I know you could too. So maybe in the future we'll have a part two. Maybe one day I'll come out to Denver and we'll go on a hike or something and chat more. But Alan, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here and I appreciate you sharing so vulnerably your story. If this story resonated with you, please do like, comment, subscribe, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. I really appreciate everyone showing up today. And more importantly, I appreciate the opportunity to share this space with you, Alan. So thank you again.
Likewise, Laura, such a gift to spend time with you. And again, so honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.